Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that I think about a lot, which is how to become self-employed and the path to self-employment. What does that look like? Specifically, we're going to be talking about this diagram, which is from a book called The Cashflow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. Robert Kiyosaki, very interesting guy. I might make a video on him in the future, but he is most well known for writing this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's kind of a staple in the pantheon of personal finance books. And the Cashflow Quadrant book isn't quite as well known. And full disclosure, I haven't read it, but I came across the diagram the other day and I thought it was really interesting and hooks into a lot of other kind of popular wisdom on this topic. Okay, so with that, let's get into this diagram. So you can see that the diagram has E and then S and then B and then I. And so the way that you read it is kind of top, bottom, and then go over to the right and down. So it's like an S almost. And so we'll go ahead and start and go through each one of these and explain kind of what the idea is behind each. So let's start with E. This is an employee. This is going to make a lot of sense to you. Basically, this is someone that works 40 or more hours a week, probably salaried. You are trading time for money. You also may get benefits like health insurance. In America, we need that, and other things like paid time off. But the idea is that you essentially are giving your work week to some employer. In exchange, they're giving you money. Pretty straightforward. The way that one of these diagrams puts it is you have a job. I think that makes sense to all of us. Okay, let's look at the next square. That is S, that is self-employed. So the idea behind this quadrant is basically that you are a freelancer or a consultant. So the way that one particular diagram I found puts it is you go from you have a job to you own a job. And it's not really that different in a lot of ways. You're still trading time for money, but the thing is you only are getting paid as much as you work, and you probably don't have benefits and paid time off like you would have in a regular job. I think for a lot of people, this would actually be kind of a step down, like not moving in the right direction. With that said, I think there's a reason S is kind of the second quadrant on the road to becoming self-employed, because essentially you are a little business yourself, but you're limited in certain ways, but we'll get into that in a second. I think it's really important to understand that on both of these two quadrants on the left, you are trading time for money. That is kind of the point. Okay, let's move to the right side of the four squares. So that's going to be B and I. But before we get into that, it's really important to talk about leverage. So I just mentioned you are trading time for money. You basically are limited by yourself. So the idea behind not having leverage with both of those two squares on the left is that you can only earn as much money as you yourself can possibly generate. You cannot scale beyond yourself. This ability to scale beyond yourself is called leverage. And so I'm going to borrow a little bit from Naval Ravikant here. So he says that the three kinds of leverage are labor, capital, which we'll talk about, and code/media. So essentially, when you have leverage, you're able to use one or more of those things in order to produce for yourself outsized returns that wouldn't be possible if you were an employee or self-employed, because you're limited by yourself in your own capacity. And that is really important when talking about the third quadrant, which is B, business owner. So the way that the diagram puts this is you own a system that works for you. So that could be labor. So you are renting other people's time out for money, whereas before you were renting your own time out for money. So labor leverage. You also have code and media leverage, according to Naval. So as I said, this is owning a system that works for you, so that it doesn't have to be a system of people. It can be a system of computer code or a system of YouTube videos out on the internet that are generating passive income from AdSense. Really anything in the creator economy is kind of going to be in this bucket as well because of the code media leverage aspect. And we'll skip capital leverage because that's in the next quadrant. But the big takeaway here is that you have leverage, you are able to scale beyond yourself, and you own a system that works for you. This is really, to me, kind of the peak or the pinnacle or the idea behind being self-employed, is that you have this wonderful system, you're able to scale beyond yourself, your inputs are separated from your outputs, just another way of putting this, which I think is really important, because in most jobs, even really high-paying jobs like doctors, lawyers, engineers, you are paid relative to how much you put in, time that is. And so when you own this business or this system, it helps you to separate your inputs from your outputs. Very cool, very powerful. And then the last quadrant is I, investor. That means your money is generating income for you rather than a system generating income for you. And this is a really common pattern you see in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, where people will build a business, sell that business, and then use the money that they generated from selling their business and invest it elsewhere. So if you think of famous venture capitalists, for example, like Peter Thiel and others. So Peter Thiel started PayPal, sold PayPal, and then became a professional investor. Another important thing to note here is that there's also leverage in investment. So you're able to generate outsized returns based on what you're putting in. Your inputs are not connected to your outputs. So as I mentioned before, these two squares on the right have leverage, the two on the left don't, but I intentionally didn't talk about capital leverage in the last square because we have a whole square dedicated to it right here. So that is the idea behind the cash flow quadrants and leverage, the path to self-employment. I really enjoyed this when I found it. It made complete sense to me. I think it's a helpful way of kind of picturing for yourself, if you're currently an employee and you want to get to E or I, how to do that. So you begin maybe by trading your time out for money as an employee, then you move to a freelance model, then maybe you get in more work than you can possibly do on your own and you hire a few freelancers yourself. Then you begin to move more into the E territory, where you're owning a system that is working on your behalf, you're renting other people's time out for money, you're able to scale beyond yourself, and then you continue to build that up, and then maybe you turn into an investor at some point. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I hope you found this a helpful mental model for how to progress all the way through to self-employment. I'd love to know your thoughts. Was this helpful? Did you enjoy this video? Is this something that you're going to try to implement on your own in the future? Love hearing from you guys, so please feel free to leave a comment. I respond to all my comments. If you're still here, you'd probably like the rest of my channel, which basically focuses on those points of leverage, right? So I talk about code, I talk about personal finance and investing, and then sometimes about self-improvement. But if you're interested in those kind of things, feel free to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.